Blog Talk Radio.
Are you there, Chris? Well, it appears we're having some technical difficulties, folks, so welcome to Race Chat Live. Hopefully we'll get the technical difficulties cleared up here in a minute and get Chris and Taz here. Hello, hello. I heard something there for a second. We're having issues with BTR. Or Mr. Chris Creighton's producing, and he says he keeps getting kicked out. So I don't even know if anybody's even hearing this. But at any rate, we're working on it, folks.
Are you ready? Your wedding day. A day that you've envisioned in your mind since you... Are you ready? Your wedding day. A day that you've envisioned...
Okay, never mind. Let me add people in here. I finally got in as producer. Chris was having a hard time, so... let's see here.
Am I unmuted?
You're on, Taz. We're good. We got to wait for Chris to call back then. Go ahead and start us off.
All right, we want to apologize for the technical difficulties to start our show. We got the opening round of the second round of the NASCAR playoffs for the Cup Series starting this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. Some big playoff implications that have happened. One of them, of course, being Kyle Busch, who was looking like an easy front runner at the start of the race, and then just before stage one ended, he thought he had a tire failure, and that wasn't the case, and then the car just snapped around on him, and now he finds himself on the bottom of the food chain here in the playoff standings. A couple other drivers who were running up front that ended up not having the results that they were looking for was Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick. It seemed like it was a back-and-forth battle with a lot of these drivers in terms of pit strategy, too. Obviously, at the end of stage one, you had drivers that were sacrificing the chance of earnings to go in pit. You had drivers that felt like they needed the stage points and they stayed out. And then you had non-playoff drivers who were trying to play a factor into this race as well. A couple to throw in there: Michael McDowell, who was eliminated in the last round, found himself in the top 10 in stage one and finished the race with a top 15 finish. Other ones as well: Kevin Harvick with a top 10 finish as well. Daniel Suarez and Chase Briscoe were a couple other ones that threw their noses in. Eric Jones. Bubba Wallace was looking like to be the favorite to the start of that race. Texas played a lot of different varieties this weekend for the Cup Series. Was there any surprises?
I know Bubba started up front, but I didn't actually expect him to dominate. And the end of the race certainly threw me for a loop because I thought for sure Bubba had it all sewn up and William Byron just, shoo boy. He just come out of nowhere, and he didn't have to lead a lap except the last one.
And that's the one that matters most.
Exactly. So I was definitely surprised because I honestly thought Bubba had it.
Yeah, it seemed like he was the favorite all weekend long. We go back and look. I kind of want to look back at practice here. Bubba Wallace, shockingly, was not a top 10 car at all. So it was looking like he would have been out the window early. Then in qualifying, he starts on the pole and leads a lot of laps with a front runner. Ends up on the podium. I want to check one thing quick to see how many laps did he lead at it, because I'm pretty sure he led the most laps of that race. And if not, I'll be surprised.
You know, Larson looked pretty darn strong there for a while too.
It looked like it was either him or Bubba that were going to win the race.
Right. Yeah, William Byron was not on my radar.
Bubba Wallace led the most laps at Texas, leading 111, and he was the only driver to have triple digits in the lap leading count.
Okay.
Kyle Larson led 99 laps. He was just short. Tyler Reddick like 36. So those were basically your top 3 cars all race long. Like I said, Larson and Reddick, for their end results, did not show the races that they had.
No, absolutely not. But then a lot of good cars got wrecked out, so.
Exactly. Now the question is, was there really much of a tire issue, or was it kind of just parts failing during race procedures? Because, yeah, we can look at Kyle Busch, but you also had Austin Dillon. He was basically the first one. And then you had J.J. Yaley. I believe he had a tire issue as well. Ty Gibbs, and the other question we got to talk about here is Ty Gibbs versus Denny Hamlin. They collided on pit road.
Right.
Was that the question is that a rookie mistake on Ty Gibbs being in the wrong place on pit road coming down, or was there a miscommunication somewhere along that line?
Or did Denny get in his way on purpose? You know, can't rule that one out either.
To me, it seems like that was a miscommunication. I feel like that was a spotter miscommunication or crew chief miscommunication. I feel like that incident could have been easily avoided. I know everyone's trying to fight for every spot, but maybe Ty needs to think about the bigger picture, because he's not in any sort of playoff picture at all.
Right. Well, what did you think about the racing overall?
Overall, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good overall. I mean, like I said, there was a lot of different varieties, a lot of, if you gave me a bingo card on this race alone, I think there were a couple things that I wouldn't have on that bingo sheet.
Right.
I mean, it seemed like Toyota and Larson were, or I should say 2311 specifically, and Kyle Larson were the head of the class. Good to see Hendrick get the 300th win for the organization. I'm trying to look at race results here quick. So Tyler Reddick did win the first stage. Chris Buescher, Christopher Bell, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe most, if not all, of the top 10 in stage 1 ended up staying out. Reddick, Buescher, Bell, Byron, McDowell, Elliott, Blaney, Briscoe. I believe those 8 at least stayed out. I believe Hamlin and Bubba did pit right at that point. Stage 2, Larson, Eric Jones, Denny Hamlin, the top 3 out of there. And again, RFK making noise, top 10 runs. And when it's all said and done, Byron leads the one and only lap he needed. Ross Chastain, the second place finisher. Bubba Wallace, your podium. Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, Kevin Harvick sneaks in for a top 10 finish. Brad Keselowski, Daniel Suarez. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Chase Briscoe sneak in for top 10s. And those two are, actually I should say 3, are normally when we talk about hot picks, those 3 are normally the guys we put in the underdog list.
Right.
are we seeing a sense of hope in some of these guys now that there's no pressure for them since they're just running for the best points position possible?
Well, that could be. It's a quandary because it doesn't matter if you're in the chase or not. You still want to win.
Right.
And then if you are in the chase, then yeah, you have to try to maximize your points position, whether you can get the win or not. So, it's hard to say where each driver's mindset is at. I did pull up, Adam Stern said that USA Network got a 1.16 rating and 2 million viewers for the Sunday race at Texas, up from a 1.11 rating and 1.9 million viewers last year, though the 2022 race had a rain delay in the middle of it. NASCAR was the number one sport of U.S. cable TV on Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's saying something, competing with Sunday Night Football, too.
Right. And not to mention the games that weren't on broadcast television, but, were on various cable channels. So I found that rather interesting.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the people said this was one of the best Texas races to recent date. I may have to join in on that bubble. If we take a look at the playoff standings quick, obviously William Byron walked into the round of 8. So the next 2 races for him, he can try to rack up the stage points or just play it safe on these next 2. Just kind of not put so much pressure on him. Meaning that the next 2 races are, I guess you can essentially say they're wild cards.
Right. Well,
then you have
Daga's a crapshoot. We all know that.
And then you have Denny Hamlin sitting second, plus 37. Chris Buescher sitting third, plus 22. Christopher Bell in fourth, plus 20. Regular season champion Martin Truex Jr., plus 19 in fifth. Ross Chastain, plus 12 in sixth. Brad Keselowski, plus 8 in seventh. Kyle Larson is in the 8th and final playoff spot right now with a plus 2. Bubba Wallace, despite having the run that he did have, still sits under the cutoff line, but only 2 points under. Tyler Reddick in 10th, 3 points under. Ryan Blaney, 11 points under in 11th. And Kyle Busch, who did not have the run he was looking for, is minus 17 under the cutoff. And if my memory serves me right, he needed this race, in my honest opinion, in order to have any shot of moving on to the next round.
Right.
Because, yeah, Kyle Busch is a super speedway racer, but I feel like Talladega is not one of those tracks he does well at.
Yeah, no, it's not one of the better ones.
And then road course racing, I don't think sits his forte, especially the Charlotte road course. I mean, looking at our round table right now, we have Ryan Blaney moving on, who's under the cutoff line, and Tyler Reddick we have moving on, and he's under the cutoff line. So we're looking at a 2 for 4 at the moment.
Right. Yeah, maybe we didn't think that out so well, huh?
I guess not, but Chris has said it all year long, and he said it last year too. William Byron's just having a breakout year. We've known in seasons past William Byron's just somebody who last few years, we either get one of two versions of William Byron. The first one is the more common one, which is where he wins within the first, I think it's like five or six races. And then we don't hear anything of him for basically the rest of the season. Or he stays consistent quietly, and then when he needs to win the most, he shines through. Feel like he's finally broken through because he's won races all around this season. And he's the most winningest driver, too.
And he brought Hendrick their 300th win overall, which is quite an accomplishment.
But I know Chris would sit here and say it could be that I think with Bowman and Chase Elliott having their injuries, I think it gave William Byron the opportunity to kind of peek through. Because the only other driver he would have to compete against is Larson.
Yeah.
And Larson, on the other hand, I think in this playoff format right now, I think we're seeing the true Larson and Cliff Daniels combination. I just think that Larson has a bad jinx or bad mojo for the round of 12. And it's hard to believe, being that he's a championship driver.
Right. But, other championship drivers have gotten knocked out already. Logano. Who saw him getting knocked out? I think
if you look back at his past track record, and I believe they said in the modern era playoff format, Logano has always been eliminated in the odd years. But on the even years, he is the one that gets into at least the championship four. And we've said it all year long that
statistic. Go ahead.
It is, and we've said it all year long. Logano didn't seem the Logano that we got last year the entire season long.
Yeah, there's been something. Well, he overall, I think, has had struggles this year. So I don't think that's exclusive to Logano, but yeah, you're right. He has not performed this year like we expected him to.
But now this leads to my next question, and Chris mentioned this question to us in our group chat yesterday, and his question was, does RFK owe any love to the other Fords if they found something? Part of me believes if RFK's success has to come from anywhere, I believe it would have to be, in my mind, it would have to be Keselowski would have to thank Penske. Because, yes, Dale Jr. did give Keselowski his, I don't really want to say big break, but his big opportunity for doors to open. And when Keselowski got over to Penske, we started seeing the Brad Keselowski that would compete for wins, top 5s, top 10s, consistently week in, week out. But with the new car, new team last year, if you take that away, Brad's basically, for the most part, picked up where he left off as if he was still with Penske. Am I on the right track, or do you think something else?
Well, I definitely think Brad learned from his time at Penske and was very successful there. And I definitely think he transferred that over to his new team. And I think Chris Buescher has been the recipient of all of that knowledge because, look at how he's kicked his performance up. And, yeah, Brad is basically, he's now performing again at the level he was over at Penske. Does he owe them anything for that? I don't know about that. I'm sure he had playbooks and whatnot that he took over with him, but
I'm sure, and I don't believe RFK has any sort of alliance with any other 4 teams other than either with Front Row or with Rick Ware. I'm not sure what alliance they have, but they don't share an alliance with anybody else. So it's hard to really sit here and say if RFK owes anything to any other Ford in this matter of fact.
I mean, other than sharing manufacturer wide, I don't see that Brad necessarily has to share anything with Penske, but that depends on what his loyalty and his relationship with the captain is at this point. We don't know behind the scenes whether him and Roger are still close or if there's any animosity there because of the change. So, it's hard to say.
And speaking of drivers, in terms of relationships with their former bosses and teams or whatever, Kyle Busch recently had an interview done, and it was released today. That interview was released today of how things have been since this is basically his 1-year anniversary of him announcing leaving Joe Gibbs to go to RCR. And he was asked the tough question of how are things between him and JGR in terms of his old team and his relationship with Gibbs and stuff like that. And Kyle Busch said it honestly. He said, for the most part, it's kind of awkward. He said him and his car chief over at that team are basically the only ones that are close because they've known each other for so long. But he said he'll talk to them for the most part. But he said, really, it's been awkward.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, he was with them for how long? I did see that article. I did not read it. I will have to take a look at that. But yeah, I can see where it could be awkward. Absolutely. But it all depends on what kind of terms. And this applies to him, to Brad, whoever. It all depends on the kind of terms that you left on. You know, did you feel that your team was, or your team owner or whatever, you know, was doing their best to try to secure your spot? Or do you feel like you were left hanging? You know, and as far as the actual crew members go, that's got to all be predicated on how long their relationships were, whether they can still maintain a friendship or not.
I mean, I think with Kyle Busch, he said it himself. I mean, and Brad probably thinks of the same thing here with the move that Kyle Busch made. He said it feels like it's like a brand new, fresh start. Like it was a much needed fresh start. And he said it wasn't a fresh start for. When he meant by that, it wasn't something on the personal side of things, but it was also a fresh start in terms of his career. Because who knows how long Kyle Busch would have stayed with Joe Gibbs? Who knows where his career could have led if he stayed there?
I think if Mars hadn't given up the ghost, I think Kyle would still be with JGR.
I could see that.
You know, because sponsorship is so important these days, and, you know, it kind of sucks, but it is, and that's a fact. And, you know, when Mars backed out and, you know, then there's the whole question of, could Gibbs have tried harder to find other sponsors, you know, blah, blah, blah. I think we've all had this conversation before. You know, ultimately the decision was made, and, you know, like I said, whether it was on good or bad terms is going to reflect on the relationships that the drivers and team members have going forward, you know, depending on whether they were friends from way back when or not.
And while we're on the topic of Kyle Busch too, he has mentioned in not only one but two interviews that he's going to stay in Cup until he feels like he's had enough. And it doesn't come as to a surprise that he's basically going to stop Cup racing up until when Brexton starts getting ready to run in the Truck Series.
Yeah, so that's, you know, Harvick's got his development agency. Denny's got his 2311 ownership. Kyle has his small truck team, but his big focus is going to be on Brexton. We all know that. It's very obvious. You know, so, yeah, once Brexton reaches a certain point, Kyle's going to get out of the car so that he can manage his own son.
Well,
I think that's rather obvious.
In a way, he kind of already manages him because, according to Kyle Busch, while, yes, Brexton is his own son, but Brexton still runs for TBM.
Right.
So, and Kyle Busch has mentioned, like, when Brexton first started racing, it was basically, you know, you show up to the track, and when it's time to go out on the track and do what you're supposed to do. It's business, and then when you come off the track, you just go off and play. But he said that Brexton has turned into somebody like a kid at his age. You would have thought how he acts. He's been doing this for quite a while because not only, Brexton's winning races, but he's learning and racing in a way that a true racer should, which is basically, getting in there, learning, watching tape and listening and understanding things. And Brexton's not only running just one car; he's running two different cars on two different surfaces.
Right.
He's not taking a go-kart running on a dirt track. He's running a mini sprint on dirt and running a bandolero on the asphalt.
Well,
but
all I can say about that is look at who his father is. He's got his path charted out for him. He knows where he needs to be, when he needs to be there, what advances he needs to make. So obviously we need to keep an eye on the kid, but we also need, we don't hear as much about Cash and Owen, but those are kids to watch out for too. And that brings up an interesting point. All these young kids of current drivers and whether they've truly got the talent or is it who their fathers are? Not to mention the big purses that are behind them.
But that lies a question mark with Kyle Busch and Brexton. Yes, I'm not taking anything away from Brexton at all. What he's accomplished, how he's matured at his age level. But everyone's gonna when Kyle Busch sits here and says, when I'm done with Cup, I'm going to go down to trucks. Hopefully I win a championship in trucks, because by the time Brexton's going to be old enough to be running in trucks, him and Brexton are going to be sharing a ride, or Kyle Busch is going to be running select races with Brexton, because Kyle has mentioned that once Brexton gets to the point where he can run at least the small tracks, Brexton's going to be running those, and Kyle's going to run the bigger tracks because Brexton won't be old enough. And Brexton's going to have a full-time ride when he's old enough.
Well, and again, I bring the point up of the deep pockets that these kids have behind them. And I'm not taking anything away from Brexton's skill level. If he truly has that talent, then God bless him. But my point is, if it weren't for who their dads are, would these kids be at the level where they're at right now? Because they sure got a lot of insider knowledge behind them, aside from the money and the sponsorship. And the money and the sponsorship is what the local kids don't have.
Right, and this is but we don't know what kind. Yes, we know the dollar signs, ideally, that Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, Harvick, Boyer, they bring in with their kids, but are they the ones bringing in the dollar ship or the dollar signs in terms of sponsor-wise to the kids, or are they kind of letting the kids kind of, get a feel for it for themselves? That's the question mark we don't see behind the scenes either.
Right, but I would think that from a sponsor view, whether it's on a small level while they wait to see what happens, there has to be some transfer there between dad sponsors and who might be putting a little bit of money behind them just because of the name. And we're talking young kids here. So don't get me wrong. I'm not disparaging these kids at all. I'm just saying they've got a little bit more advantage than your next door neighbor or mine.
This is true.
So
and who knows?
let's
maybe
talk about,
maybe we'll see Parker again. Who knows? We could see Parker be in that same wheelhouse too.
Right. We'll have to see. So let's talk about some news this week. Hendrick Motorsports signing Boris Said for the Roval race. Woo-hoo, Said heads. And Roger Caruth in the 17 at Phoenix. Some last minute news that came out.
Boris Said, in a way, doesn't entirely surprise me with where he's racing. The team that he's with, the team that he's racing for, shocks me a little bit. I didn't expect Hendrick to grab him, because normally we're used to
that was interesting.
Because normally we're used to seeing Boris Said being in at least mid-tier equipment.
Right.
Roger Caruth, I believe this is a big opportunity for him. I do believe he's currently running for GMS Racing in the Truck Series right now.
I can neither confirm or deny.
And I'm trying to look it up quick. Because if he's running with GMS, this could be an eye-opener. Yeah, he's with GMS right now in the Truck Series. And I know he's ran some races with the Alpha Prime team. I think that's like the Tommy Joe Martins.
Yeah, I know he's done a couple of Xfinity races.
But I feel like this could be an opportunity where if he gets a solid finish out of this, he could be in line for possible Cup ride with Hendrick in the future, or maybe work a deal out with Junior Motorsports, or should he stay in trucks? The question's going to be what Chevy team will he go, being that GMS is out the door? I couldn't see Hendrick say, hey, go run for Kyle Busch Motorsports or Nice Motorsports, because, I mean, those are your competitors.
Well, maybe they're vetting him for an Xfinity ride next year.
And then and with news as well, it ain't going to be with Junior Motorsports either, because on the Xfinity side of things, Sammy Smith has signed with Junior Motorsports for next year. And I believe he's taking over the Josh Berry machine too, the 8 car. Because Brandon Jones and Sam Mayer announced earlier in the month that they both signed extensions. Justin Allgaier, that's Junior's boy. He ain't gonna give him up.
Right.
But according to what I'm seeing, nothing has been official as of yet. But Allgaier said that after his Food City 300 win, that him and Junior are working on a 1-year extension to keep him in for at least for next year. I feel like if Raja makes the best of this opportunity, he could be headed to Junior Motorsports within the next 2 years at least.
Right. So we did have Ryan Preece confirming that he's going to be with Stuart Haas again next season.
I mean, I'm not surprised by that news, but that wasn't the news I was wanting to hear or expecting from that camp at all. Because obviously the Stuart Haas news that everyone's been trying to dig and scratch and claw for is the number 10 ride. And
right.
Eric Almirola, what's the deal there? Is Smithfield staying? Is Almirola stepping out? Are we seeing Almirola stay for one more year? Do we have a driver that could take over that ride?
If Smithfield goes, Eric goes. Because he's already talked about retiring, the past 2 years? So if Smithfield decides to back out, then I see him finally retiring.
Well, the question remains, if he steps away, let's just say, that leaves the 10-car open, we don't have many free agents left on that side. Would Stuart Haas pull somebody up through their Xfinity program, or would they snag a free agent in, let's say, maybe a Noah Gragson, for an example? Or, right. But again, this all comes in sponsorship dollars as well, but we have to look at it from the side of, if Cole Custer comes up, who does he bring? Essentially, he's going to bring Haas Automotive and Tooling, which we already knew about. We've seen it before. Riley Herbst will more than likely have Monster Energy move up with him, should he move up.
Right. Which is a big question mark. He hasn't exactly had a stellar season this year.
But it comes down to if one of those two drivers that move up bring that big sponsor in, would Smithfield be able to work with them, or would Smithfield back out? And you don't normally see big sponsors try to compete for spots on a car.
Right.
If let's look at it from, let's say, Jimmy Johnson perspective. Jimmy Johnson always had lows, but if he brought in a company such as, for example, like Target, I don't know how you would have two major corporations try to work with one driver.
But we've also seen major sponsorship diminish to a race-by-race decision rather than a full season. So as long as you don't have competitors like Lowe's and Home Depot sponsoring the same driver, having multiple major sponsors is the norm these days. Because a lot of sponsors, and we've seen a lot of major sponsors leave the sport. But some of them have stayed, but in a smaller capacity. Kind of surprised me about Mars, that they couldn't work something out where, they sponsored maybe 6 races a year or whatever, versus being the main sponsor on the car.
Right.
All right, so we're going to Dega next weekend. What are we looking at?
Well, the storyline
besides crapshoot.
Well, the storylines pertain to obviously around the playoff drivers. Like I said earlier, William Byron, with his win, guarantees himself into the next race. So basically, he's looking at Talladega as in one of two ways. He's going to look at this as, do I want to help my teammates in terms of Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, push through on their part of the playoffs to solidify the Hendrick, I don't want to say dominance, but Hendrick stronghold? Or does William Byron look at this more of himself? Because he could go out there and try to rack up playoff points.
Well, that's going to be an interesting thing, because it's a must-win situation, or you're done. And with Talladega being a crapshoot, there's no way in knowing.
And the other side of the storylines, too, is let's look at Ryan Blaney and Kyle Busch. Both of those drivers are double digits under the cutoff line. They're going to have to look at this race to try to make up
as
for something.
Must-win.
Exactly. Kyle Larson's probably looking at this as a must-win, being that he's only 2 points above. He's only 2 points in the good.
Right.
Truex is probably looking at that, and he's plus 19. Because Truex knows He's not a super speedway racer. And if Truex learned anything from the last round, no matter what kind of point gap you got, you ain't safe at all.
Exactly. So we've got a lot of drivers that are going to be pushing for that win because they need it.
And the one thing that we obviously can look at with Talladega too is that this is a lot of times this race not only moves you into the next round, but it could propel you into the Final Four, because we've seen the year when Brad Keselowski was essentially in a must-win situation. He won Talladega, and I believe that same year he reached the Final Four. I believe the year Ryan Blaney won Talladega to move on, he was in discussion to be in the Final Four. But looking at...
So with that said, let's talk about our hot picks.
Well, right now, we are ideally looking at the favorites being Brad Keselowski, Chase Elliott, and Ryan Blaney. I leave certain drivers off the table on purpose for a reason. For contenders, I'm looking at Chris Buescher, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Kevin Harvick. Underdogs, I'm looking at Eric Jones, Ryan Preece, and Eric Almirola.
What about Reddick?
See, that's one driver I'm not entirely sure about, because if he's going to be up front, he's going to have a lot of Toyota help. I've never seen Reddick be much of a super speedway racer, unless I've been sleeping under a rock and missed something.
Okay. Well, I just have to throw his name in the hat because, we never know with him.
Well, the few drivers I circled, unless one I almost added on and threw away one of the three names I mentioned before. Actually, two of them would have to be Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. I know we've said Kyle Busch is not a big Talladega person, but while his average finish says otherwise, which is a 19.9, he has 2 wins, 8 top 5s, and 10 top 10s. So he knows how to win here. Joey Logano, on the other hand, also knows how to win here. And he's another one where his average finish may not say much, but his 3 wins, 9 top 5s, and 11 top 10s also say something as well.
I didn't realize Kyle had that many wins here. That's interesting. I think that I could put Logano as a contender and Busch as an underdog?
I was thinking about sliding them up one notch. Put Logano as a favorite and Busch as a contender. Only because this is super speedways is where Ford shines.
Okay.
And looking at Talladega, Ryan Blaney has been one of those that runs very well here. But normally, as long as you have a teammate behind you, it's hard to get pushed across the line. And I know there's Ford, Chevy alliances, Toyota tries to pair up with somebody in the heat of the moment type of deal, but you always want to have a teammate behind you. And I feel like with Ryan Blaney, he's going to bring somebody with him. And honestly, if I were Blaney, I would be bringing Logano with me. I would be sitting down with Logano and say, look, I know Talladega. Between the two of us, we have 5 wins together. I would have to look at Logano as a favorite of some sort.
All right. I think I can get on board with that. Put Logano as a favorite and Busch as a contender.
Another contender we could look at is, I want to put in there, is Ross Chastain.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Can't rule him out. What about Suarez?
Yeah, it's a good thing you mentioned, because we mentioned Blaney and Logano as a team. You know Chastain's going to have to bring somebody. I could easily see Suarez as an underdog, per se.
Mm-hmm. He's done okay at big tracks like this.
Yeah, he's been one that he's been one where he knows how to find himself in the right spots. I wouldn't necessarily say the race-winning spots, but he knows how to put himself in the right spots in the right situations should things play into his hands. And like I said, you're in a situation, and with Suarez, yeah, he's not racing for a championship or anything, but you know, in this type of season, not only are you going to follow manufacturer orders, you're going to want to follow team orders to the best of your ability.
Right.
And like I said with Blaney and Logano, Chastain's going to want Suarez with him.
Right. So the other name I want to throw out is Bubba Wallace. I notice we don't have any Toyotas up top.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I wasn't I was sort of thinking Bubba, but I was thinking somebody in the Toyota camp, but a little higher up, who has the ability on the super speedways.
Hamlin.
There you go. He's got 2. He has 2 wins, 10 top 5s, 15 top 10s. He does have Daytona. He does have, what is it, 3 or 4 Daytona 500s?
Right.
He's obviously got the knack for super speedways, and it's odd to see that because really, looking at this list, he's the only Toyota to talk about. And in terms of stat-wise, everybody in the Toyota camp doesn't even touch him. I could easily throw Denny Hamlin as a favorite, being that we do have a spot open.
Okay.
Bubba Wallace, I don't want to – we can certainly talk about him. If we were to throw him on the list, I could put him as a contender. I don't necessarily want to put him as an underdog, only because I feel like Bubba does well at super speedway races.
He does. And he's got a chip on his shoulder after last weekend. So whether he takes that and works with it or lets it hold him down is what remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's gonna have to enter Talladega with the right mindset, because we all know if you enter, yes, you can enter this race saying that anything can happen, but I feel like in super speedway races, if you enter this race with the wrong mindset, you're not going anywhere.
Exactly. And so can he get himself out of the funk of the loss of this past weekend and get into that right mindset? That's going to be the factor on how he does this weekend.
Another underdog we have not mentioned is somebody who has won on a super speedway, and that is Michael McDowell.
You can never rule out McD on a super speedway. That's my opinion.
Well, apparently you couldn't rule him out at Texas, and you know what? Looking at last week's picks for Texas, when I saw Craig pick McDowell, I'm pretty sure my jaw dropped to the floor and there was an earthquake, because I couldn't believe he picked him. And you know what? He in moments where you don't expect McDowell, that's when he shows.
Right, exactly. And he no longer has the pressure of a championship, so he's all out for winning the race.
And he already knows he's guaranteed a top 16 points finish anyway. So he knows that front row and his 34 team are going to be in good hands for at least for next year.
Right.
But again, there's a lot of storylines. We threw in a lot of drivers that are not in the playoffs, but we're in the playoffs. Talladega is going to have storylines. We already have plenty of storylines going in, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot going out. As we've mentioned, Joey Logano's out of the playoffs, but he's a favorite for Talladega. He may be out of the playoffs, but he's got a teammate that's in it.
Right.
He's going to try to do what he can to put Ryan Blaney into the next round. Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick, they're on the same team. You know that, yes, both of them want to get into the next round, but you know that they're going to have to follow team orders. And I'm sure Denny Hamlin's going to be right with them too, saying that if you guys want to move on to the next round, then let's work together. And I'm sure that they've got the orders of let's work together. And once the last lap comes, it's fair game.
Right.
And we know with Byron being safe, the question's going to be, is he going to try to rack up the points that he may want for next round? Or is he going to help push Larson and Chase to not only get them to the next round of the Drivers' Championship, but the Owners, because Chase Elliott is running the Owner playoffs. And of course,
who's going to?
And of course, there's the RFK duo. And of course, there's the RFK duo. They've been riding momentum. I don't think they're going to slow down anytime soon.
No, they're going to keep pushing each other. They're going to make sure one of those cars gets in the Final Four. At this point, I don't think they care which one. I think they just want to make sure one of them makes it. All right, so we got our lists all set then. And any other racing news? Anything going on at Fonda or local stuff they're in?
Fonda's done for the season. Fonda 200 was the last event that they had for the year. In terms of up here, it's basically big money races up here. I know there's a $50,000 to win speed showcase race at Port Royal for the modifieds coming up shortly. Within a couple of weeks, we're going to be heading to Oswego for Super Dirt Week. Pro Stocks. I know last year Ken Schrader and Kenny Wallace ran the Pro Stock class last year. So, of course, Pro Stocks will be on hand this year, as always. The Sportsman will be on hand. The 358 modifieds and the Big Block modifieds on hand as well. Matt Shepard has declared that he'll be trying to go for the B8 and Big Block modified sweep once again that he got last year.
Okay.
Tim McCready will be piloting a Big Block and returning to Oswego for Dirt Week this year. For those of you who may not know about McCready, he's a big late model driver that originally came out of New York running dirt modifieds.
So you still got a little bit of racing going up there.
We got a little bit more. A lot of tracks have basically either winding down or pretty much done for the year. And it's basically big money races now.
End of the season, get her done.
Exactly.
All right, well, in addition to the trucks and Cup running at Dega this weekend, we've got Maine ARCA running at the Salem track on Saturday on Flow, as well as ARCA West running at All-American Speedway on Flow on Saturday late. And the Wheel and Modifieds are running at North Wilkesboro, which will be on Flow Racing this weekend as well. So with all
right,
that,
so
we're
plenty of
going to
racing
cut it
action.
out. Plenty of it. So we're going to go ahead and cut it short a little bit tonight. Taz, you want to go ahead and take us on out?
Sure thing. We want to thank everyone for listening along to Race Chat Live here on Blog Talk Radio. If you miss us live at any time, you can always catch us on any forms of podcast, such as iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, RSS Feed, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, GeoSavin, Podcast Addict, Deezer, Podchaser, YouTube, and Amazon Music. Be sure to head on over to the 110 Nation Sports website. Not only will you have links to our shows or wherever you can find us on those podcasts I've mentioned, but you can also look for blog posts. It could be racing related, sports related, pretty much anything you can name. We've got it covered. We've also got a YouTube channel. Make sure you go over and subscribe to that. I think we are either close or we hit the 50 subscriber mark. We are pretty close on that one. I know Mr. CJ's pushing it. Our YouTube channel includes not only our shows, but also clips of each show. So if you don't feel like listening into our show or want to get a sneak peek of what our shows look like, we have clips of those as well. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and I believe Instagram as well. We want to thank the sponsors that make the 110 Nation roll: Bears Bullish Market Group, Carolina Sports Plus, TNT Designs, Yellow Caution Flag Productions, and More to Music Entertainment and Karaoke. We want to say thank you, everyone, for listening along. We'll, make sure you tune in tomorrow night. Mr. CJ Sports and Mario in the studio for their weekly Wednesday night 110 Nation Sports Show. They'll be discussing Week 3 recap of the NFL. I'm sure they're going to preview Week 4 and give their picks of who's going to win. I'm sure they'll probably cover the college football. There's a lot to unfold lately in the last couple of weeks with that. Don't forget to check out Jared's show on Thursday night as he talks about anything racing safety related. There, he's got a couple, I'm sure he has a few interviews lined up ready to go to talk about that. And also Monday night, we have the 110 Nation Race Chat Live exclusives, where you'll hear Mr. CJ and Chris talk to people within the racing industry, whether it's a driver or somebody working with a race team. Just interview them and talk about their careers. We'll see you the same bad time, same bad place next Tuesday night for Race Chat Live. This has been the Caution Flag of Racing Radio. Chris Creighton, the Mama Bear, 110 Nation, Miss Lee Reed on the Tasmanian Double Flagger. Taz Taylor saying good night. We'll see you all next week.
Good night, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging through our technical difficulties, and we hope to see you again next week.
Heavenly Father, we thank you tonight for all your blessings. You said in all things give thanks. So we want to thank you tonight for these mighty machines that you brought before us. Thank you for the Dodges and the Toyotas. Thank you for the Fords. And most of all, we thank you for Roush and Yates partnering to give us the power that we see before us tonight. Thank you for GM Performance Technology and the R07 engines. Thank you for Sunoco Racing Fuel and Goodyear tires that bring performance and power to the track. Lord, I want to thank you for my smoking hot wife tonight, Lisa, my two children, Eli and Emma, or as we like to call them, the Little E's. Lord, I pray you bless the drivers and use them tonight. May they put on a performance worthy of this great track. In Jesus' name, boogity, 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 amen.